It's the World Soccer Talk podcast, the only podcast that focuses on watching soccer on TV, online, and apps. In episode 98, we discuss news about the English Championship clubs threatening to break away from the EFL, what we thought about Bundesliga's Der Klassiker. You, the readers, share your opinions about the European Super League idea, and we have the latest TV ratings of soccer games that aired in the US. My name is Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, and I'm joined by my co-host Kartik Krishnaiyer. So Kartik, we decided to do this podcast early this week. It's Wednesday as we're recording it. Thursday and Friday we are going to be in Miami for the SoccerX conference, and we hope to get some good interviews and some good information from that conference, and then report back on that next week. We'll leave the SoccerX discussion for the next podcast. But this past week, Kartik, was a really intense soccer weekend. Some really good football games. I saw three in particular that were absolutely astounding. But what for you was your favorite game from this past week?
Well, I only saw one game in its entirety, so I'll have to pick that game, which is Dortmund and Bayern. This is happening every election cycle to me, Chris, where I get busier after the election than right immediately preceding the election. So I've just been on recount duty. Florida. I did carve out time to watch specifically that match because I thought it would be a classic, their Klassiker, and it was. I have to say, we focus on media here. Keith Costigan and Ian Joy are getting really good. Maybe we'll save that for a later discussion. But I think that the chemistry between those two guys, Costigan has down what I would consider, he's talkative enough for American audiences, but not too talkative for people like you and me who like the commentary to allow a match to breathe. Ian Joy is on point. We've criticized Fox a lot on this show. We've criticized Fox a lot on WorldSoccerTalk.com, but I think this pairing has so much potential to be, for me, their best, their shining stars. And another great commentary this week for that game.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it now, because to me, they are the purest form of exceptional soccer broadcasting commentators in the United States. And what I mean by that, too, is that I look at, say, John Strong and Stuart Holden, a very American style, very talkative. I look at Ian Darke and Taylor Twellman, and that's kind of a mixture of combinations where Ian's more of a talkative English commentator, and Taylor's very precise with a lot of his analysis, and there's a little bit of banter back and forth. There's a little bit more kind of frivolity or kind of frivolous discussion. But for me, for out-and-out pure commentating, kind of just focusing on the game, focusing on what we're seeing in front of our eyes, Costigan and Ian Joy are the perfect partnership, and I think they're one of the best partnerships in the US. And Ian Joy's American. He's got a Scottish accent, but he's American. Keith Costigan has lived in the US for decades, and to me, they are two of the best commentators in the US. I mean that's what I would say, Kartik.
Yeah, and Costigan, of course, played as well in the United States with Portland and some other teams in the USL. So USL at the time, Portland, obviously they're MLS team now. Yeah, they're very, very good. They're very precise. And I think there's also a knowledge of that specific league that they've developed. Well, Ian Joy played in Germany, but that Keith Costigan has developed now with Fox in is this year 4? This is year 4 of their Bundesliga deal. And Fox has been very piecemeal in what they've done in terms of deploying commentators to Bundesliga matches. So they were random. They would have Costigan and Joy occasionally. They would have Joy in the studio occasionally. They would take the international feed. They would assign just random guys who were working at Fox to matches. I think now in year 4, they finally settled this. This is their top commentary team for Bundesliga matches. Yeah. And if it is a match involving Bayern or Dortmund, you will generally hear these two on the mic. So also, I think getting the reps in, the chemistry is really good between them. They did the Leipzig-Leverkusen game the next day, which is the only other game I caught actually this weekend. And again, another good call from them. But they were perfect for a big match like Dortmund and Bayern. And I have to say, you see the evolution. We were used to Phil Shane and Ray Hudson calling the biggest matches for us in this country, and then we eventually got used to different kinds of voices because we were watching so much of the Premier League, Arlo White, etc. But now I think, as I look at it, and it's unfortunate Fox, at least from this perspective, only has the Bundesliga in terms of top leagues, I'm kind of getting used to these two actually doing big games. They might be the best pairing on U.S. television in terms of just the entire package. Maybe that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, and you can tell that they study the game. They study the leagues. They know the leagues inside and out. They make a conscious effort to really hone their craft. And I just like Keith's style. I mean, he has a good style in terms of he's not talking too much, and there's pauses in the game. He allows for that. And then Ian Joy, just with some really incisive analysis, and it just accentuates the broadcast. And it was a great game. I mean, it was a perfect marriage between the good commentating and a great game. And I really enjoyed it. And when you think about Kartik, you mentioned it's been now I think the fourth year. Next season is the last season under Fox. So the 2019-2020 season is the last season under the current Fox contract. So we'll have to wait and see. Probably about a year from now, we'll have some idea as far as maybe who would be interested in bidding on this and if Fox would be interested in renewing the rights. But that's one to watch, and I'm sure it'll be one we'll be talking about in the next 12 months. My favorite game, Kartik, of the week, and that was a close second, was the Bayern Dortmund game, or Dortmund Bayern game. My favorite was Barcelona against Real Betis. This was an absolutely incredible game to watch at the highest level. It was a 4-3 to Real Betis at the Camp Nou, and it was just a gem of a game. It was so good, Kartik, that actually Real Betis out Barcelona at their home stadium. Just an exceptional level of football. They went at them. There wasn't one of those things where they parked the bus and held on, but they went out there with a really attacking style of football, great passing skills, and just soccer of the highest order. And I really, really enjoyed that one. The other game I would say that was one of my favorites from this past weekend, just another fantastic game, was Boca Juniors against River Plate in the Copa Libertadores final first leg. This game was scheduled originally for Saturday, but the pitch was completely waterlogged, so they moved it to on Sunday. This one I watched on Fox Deportes through Fubo TV, and the commentary was good. I mean, again, I don't speak or understand Spanish, but it was passionate, it was emotional, and of course the crowd at La Bombonera just going crazy, and this was a really exceptional atmosphere. The game was good, not the greatest game, but I think the marriage of the atmosphere and the broadcast and the occasion made the game feel even better. But a 2-2 draw, which now we go to River Plate Stadium, Stadio Monumental, I think at the end of November 24th for the second leg, and to see who's crowned champions. And anything before we move on? Anything else, Kartik, that stood out? I know you've been kind of busy, and especially with the politics, it's very all-consuming. But anything else before we move on?
Yeah, no, I didn't see anything else. I mean, I saw the Seattle-Portland game Thursday night, which was. The atmosphere was good in Seattle, but the match wasn't very good. I was disappointed by the match, actually, and the level of play. I mean, I've seen sort of the highlights of other matches, including the MLS playoff matches for the weekend, but I did not see anything else live or in nearly its entirety other than those two Bundesliga matches. Yeah,
and I saw a few other games, like some of the games from the Championship, some other Premier League games. Nothing really stood out other than the ones that I've mentioned so far. So, Kartik, let's move on to TV streaming news and some interesting news to kick things off.
Yeah, so the EFL negotiated a new contract earlier this year for the term beginning next season. 15 championship clubs, including Aston Villa, Leeds, Derby, are threatening to break away from the EFL over the TV deal, which... Chris, I mean, some quick analysis on this. There has been now more talk. Leeds owner Andrea Radrizzani, in fact, who has a background in television, had set the table a few months ago about the possibility of a Premier League 2, right? And all of this sort of thing that might come with connecting the Premier League to the lower divisions and then closing off the league potentially at some stage for television purposes. This, I think, is another small step potentially in that direction. So keep an eye on this.
Yeah, it's a 5-year deal that Sky Sports has with the EFL. So the EFL would cover the Championship, League One and League Two. And the issue is that the Championship clubs, led by Leeds United, are saying, okay, Leeds United is drawing on average about 500,000 viewers to the games in England watching the Championship. And there's other big clubs like Aston Villa, etc. They're drawing a lot of viewers. But if you look at the amount of money they're getting for the TV rights, I believe that they're getting about £2 million a season, and they have bonuses then too. As each game is shown on television, they get bonuses based on that. But they're saying that the way that the money is set up is that for League One and League Two, they're guaranteed a set fee. Those clubs are happy with it, but the Championship clubs are saying, okay, we're the ones that are driving the most number of viewers, and we're the ones that are driving the revenue and the value in this, and we're not getting the value in return in terms of the TV revenue. As a comparison, the Premier League on average, clubs would be getting for £100 million plus a season. So it's a big drop off from the £100 million to the £2 million in the Championship. And these clubs, there's 15 of them, are saying, okay, well, we're considering breaking away and having our own league. At the same time, the Premier League says we're not interested. So I think it's, there's definitely negotiation. They're definitely trying to increase the amount of money that the EFL clubs get. Whether or not they're serious enough about the breakaway league, we'll have to wait and see. But this is another one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, of course, just real quickly, I'm getting a little tired of this because the reality is that you cannot have football as a sustainable product and a working class sport if leagues continue to break away and hoard the television money. And I think the Premier League precedent is what has gotten us to the point where we are in global football, including Major League Soccer. I mean, I hate how reform advocates in the U.S. who don't like MLS and don't like closed leagues keep citing the Premier League as their inspiration because it was essentially a breakaway league in order to hoard the money. Yes, there's promotion and relegation, but the cost of relegation is so steep from a television standpoint, as you just mentioned, that it's created this kind of haves and have-nots, which to me is not what football is about. That having been said, I guess we have to live in reality, and the train's left the station, and I expect some sort of breakaway to happen. I've thought for a while the bigger championship clubs would break away from the rest of the football league, and we might be on our way.
Yeah, hopefully the EFL kind of comes back and gives some of these clubs some more money in the championship just to ease things out and hope that everyone agrees and there's a compromise reached. But again, we'll keep an eye on that one. In other news, pay TV, so whether it's cable or satellite, is losing approximately 1 million customers a quarter in its largest ever quarterly loss. That equals over 11,000 people a day are basically cancelling their cable and satellite services. So there's big opportunities, and that's why this podcast and our website and other places talk so much about streaming in terms of whether it's legal streaming services that are out there, and we can see why. 11,000 people a day in the US are cancelling the services, and that equals about 1 million people a quarter. So definitely things are heading that way more and more as each day goes by. Kartik, some big news in the world of TV and the Premier League.
Yeah, so Richard Scudamore, as we know, stepped down this past summer, announced that he was stepping down as Premier League chief, and he's brought the league to unforeseen heights, quite frankly, when he took over. So now we have Susanna Dinaj taking over as Premier League chief. She doesn't have a background in football. Her background is in television, and I just said to right when we're talking about the EFL situation, that the Premier League is essentially a made-for-TV breakaway league. So it seems like a pretty good marriage in those terms. And the Premier League is a media behemoth, right? Everything they do is about media and television development in terms of what the Premier League itself does, the entity known as the Premier League. Now, individual Premier League clubs have footballing considerations and other commercial considerations outside of TV and media. But I think the Premier League itself, they organize a competition and they sell media rights, they create media, they work through media channels. So it seems like, at least from my perspective, we had a little bit of discussion about this yesterday, Chris, a logical appointment. But I think people are going to be kind of concerned that she has no football background.
Yeah, so KTK on Twitter asked this question. He says, what do you guys think about this? Someone with TV media background, but not sports or football, sign of the future importance of media development and growth to the league. And KTK is absolutely correct. And you too, Kartik, is that this person, Susanna Denage, comes from a TV background. So she's worked for 20 years in the industry, mostly at the Discovery Channel in Europe, also Animal Planet. So leading those channels in Europe. And it's one of those things that I think it's a good evolution for the Premier League chairman. So Richard Scudamore done a fantastic job of really kind of focusing the league as the world's most popular sports league, the number one marketed soccer league in the world. And a large portion of that, one of the large reasons for that success has been from TV. So now as we go into a new decade and kind of looking at the future, I think TV is becoming more important than others, and it's an ever-changing TV landscape too. Just as we talked about with, a million people a quarter cancelling their cable and satellite subscriptions, we're moving more and more into streaming. So it's a good opportunity, I think, for the Premier League, and we'll have to wait and see. She's got definitely some obstacles in her path, including Brexit and what happens with transfers of players into England.
And in fact, I think I'll just report this real quickly. I think that there is a move afoot that's probably going to come out in the next few days to limit the number of foreign players in the Premier League after Brexit kicks in.
Right, definitely. Kind of having a quota of, you have to have...
players from the EU or players...
Right.
Yeah, right, quota of... So right now, I know that people say, oh, well, you have to have 8 English or Welsh players or players trained in England or Wales, but you do not need work permits for players from the EU. They essentially, in immigration terms, count as domestic players. My understanding is the Premier League, there had been just wild optimism, right, among Premier League fans. Oh, well, the Premier League, they're so powerful, they would never let restrictions on this happen that would impede their product. My understanding, Chris, as of yesterday evening, is that there's discussions now, and there might be some news in the next few days about quotas and the Premier League having to limit the number of EU players, the intake of EU players. Obviously, the players now in the Premier League would be grandfathered in, but future, in order to placate the Home Office in the wake of Brexit. So this thing is not as straightforward as fans and proponents of the Premier League thought it would be. I do think the league is going to be affected detrimentally by Brexit. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah,
so that's a big challenge.
Yeah, it's going to be a big challenge for her to deal with that, because the league is going to become less valuable in the eyes of people globally if all the players are going now to Spain and Italy as destinations instead of England because of Brexit. Other challenges to the European Super League. We'll discuss that a little bit more in the listener mailbag, and just the ever-changing TV landscape. So she's got a lot of challenges ahead of her. She starts in January. Richard Scudamore's time in that Premier League chairman role will end at the end of 2018. So, should be interesting to see what happens there. So moving on to TV ratings, Kartik. A big number this past week came out for Santos Laguna against Club America, Liga MX on Unamas and Univision Deportes Network, and that was 1 million viewers for that match. The Manchester Derby, Man City against Man United on NBCSN on Sunday. We have the English language number for that. We'll have to wait and see what the Spanish language number is like. But the English language number was 750,000 viewers for a game that was on NBCSN, not NBC. So a big number there for NBCSN. Some of the other numbers, Kartik, let me see what we've got. We've got one of the numbers is for the Klassiker, which we talked about. A fantastic match between Dortmund and Bayern Munich. A really great match to watch. Unfortunately, the Bundesliga not getting the rub of the green, because in the past, when they've had the game between Dortmund and Bayern Munich, oftentimes it's been on either Fox over the air or FX a few years ago, and every time that it was on a big platform like that, it seemed that it always ended up being like a boring 0-0 game. And the time that they have one of the best Klassikers in years ends up being, a 3-2 thriller-minute game, ends up being on FS2, and the viewership for that game was 138,000 viewers.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot to this. I mean, I think there's a lot to layers to unpeel in terms of the Bundesliga. I always make the comment that maybe the Premier League is more popular everywhere because it's seen as more exciting, even though in my estimation the football is good in the Premier League as it is in Spain for sure. And I think now even Italy and Germany in many ways, particularly midfield play, have surpassed the Premier League. But when I think about Dortmund, Chris, and I think about Napoli last season, although they were stuck on beIN, right? And Monaco the year before, I'm realizing the most exciting teams in Europe year after year are not even in the Premier League. So I've fallen back on this excuse that the Premier League is more exciting, even though the quality isn't as good. That's why the ratings are higher. But then when I see this match, I see Dortmund, how many chances they create, how many chances Bayern created in the first half, playing, pretty open, free-flowing football. I shake my head. I mean, this number is low. Again, it's FS2, but the number is low.
Yeah, it's one of those challenges that the Bundesliga has. I mean, it has a tough challenge where this game is on FS2, so a lot of people don't even have access to that channel. If it was on Fox, or if it was on FS1, the number would have been much greater.
But of course, more people have access to FS2, far more people than beIN.
Right.
Yet,
usually the
top
numbers
La Liga games get bigger numbers
than
this.
Right. So so it's many things. It's historical. It's in terms of loyalty. Soccer fans in the US having loyalty to different clubs that have formed over decades. There's many different things. The level of football, the language, I think is an issue too. The coverage is a big part of it too, in terms of the level of coverage and how Fox presents the Bundesliga. Does it look as if it's a top level league, or is it kind of haphazard where you don't know when the games are going to be on? If they're on FS2, FS1, is it on Fox? Sometimes they're in the studio, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's a voiceover, sometimes it's not. So it's very inconsistent. With the NBC, you can say that since day one has been consistent. You can almost sit back and with a stopwatch say, okay, this is exactly when it's going to start. This is when it's going to end. You expect the same type of people in the studio. You know what you're going to get. With the Bundesliga, it's been all over the place. And like we said, too, I mean, this is almost at the end of the Bundesliga rights cycle with Fox Sports. I mean, after this season, there's just one more season to go. And maybe finally they're getting it right after year 4, but it's almost over. So, it's a shame. And also scheduling, too. I look at the Bundesliga and say, okay, is this the right decision to schedule a game at this time of the year where you know that the United States is one of the biggest markets that you could possibly grow in other than Asia, and you know that there's college football on, which is why...
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's lots of mistakes from both sides, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it may be too late, because a year from now, when the bidding is up for the Bundesliga and there's more people looking at renewing the rights or acquiring the rights, it may end up going to streaming. It could go to an ESPN Plus or a Bleacher Report Live or a DAZN, and it's no longer on television. So those numbers would go down.
Yeah.
Some of the other viewership numbers, Kartik, Major League Soccer games from this past week, the MLS Cup playoffs, kind of disappointing, actually. I think from the ESPN games, Atlanta against NYCFC, 285,000 viewers on ESPN on Sunday from 5:30 to 7:30. And what else was there? It was the New York Red Bulls against Columbus on FS1, 188,000 viewers on Sunday from 7:30 to 9:30 Eastern Time. And then, kind of just disappointing overall. All right, Kartik, let's move on to listener mailbag. First up is Rob Keith. He says, hey guys, I've been listening to the pod for a few years now, and I always look forward to Thursdays when a new episode comes out. I appreciate your analysis, insight, and news updates, but I've always felt that you've been too harsh towards Fox. That being said, I was absolutely furious at the way they handled the Dortmund-Bayern game on Saturday. This is the biggest match of the year in the Bundesliga, and there were storylines abound to play up. Instead of jumping on this, they relegated the match to FS2, a channel that I and much of America don't get. It was an end-to-end match, and if you had a non-soccer fan watching that second half, they would have no doubt jumped on the bandwagon. It was a golden opportunity for Fox, and they dropped the effing ball. For the past 3 years, I've subscribed to Fox Soccer Match Pass, but since they no longer have rights to the Champions League and Europa League, I felt that $140 for the year was way overpriced, so I decided not to buy it. I created another email and signed up for their free 7-day trial in order to watch the match. At full time, I cancelled the free trial. It's shameful that a hardcore soccer fan had to jump through hoops to watch the biggest match of the season. How would a casual or prospective fan have the opportunity to see this incredible match? It's shameful that Fox didn't market the match or make it available to more people. I realize that college football gets higher ratings, but if you're trying to grow the Bundesliga in the US, this was the match to push. Fox clearly has no interest in growing anything except their bottom line, and they have no long-term vision for soccer. I wish the Bundesliga could cancel their TV rights deal so another carrier could pick it up next year. I'm sorry for the rant, but most of all, I'm sorry for ever thinking you were biased. Thanks for the work you guys put in every week. So Rob Keith, appreciate the honest feedback there. Yes, we are harsh on Fox. I think our expectations are high. Maybe higher than some people in the industry, but at the end of the day, whether it's Fox or ESPN or NBC or Turner Sports or BN Sports, we've been critical of all of them in different ways. But what I'm trying to do really is to elevate the coverage of soccer, elevate it to a level that fans can really appreciate and sink their teeth into and get more out of. And that's why sometimes maybe I'm a little bit harsh on Fox. Kartik, a lot of good points there. Anything you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about Fox not having a long-term vision for soccer is correct. I think that they acquire properties just to fill programming, airtime, and then preempt those properties when it doesn't quite fit what they're doing. And the constant bumping of this match, this is the latest example of it. 1 year, there was such an outcry, they moved it to FX, remember, but it was supposed to be on FS2.
Yep.
On Fox Soccer Plus that time. That was in 2016, March or February or March of 2016. I just don't know what to say anymore. I mean, and unfortunately, we continue to be harsh, even though their actual coverage, their actual production levels, everything has improved, but it's still well below the required standard. And as Rob mentions, they didn't build up this match. They didn't build up the storylines. I think the actual presentation from Costigan and Joy was off the charts good. But what about before, after, halftime, all of that stuff? They didn't do properly, and they didn't build it up properly through the week. So, if it's a comparable game in the Premier League, comparable match in the Premier League, how NBC builds it up, and if it's El Clasico, how BN builds it up. Mm-hmm. So the play it's there. Fox just doesn't follow it.
Jester Fish says, for me, the post-match interviews in general are one of my least favorite things. Always reminds me of the Bull Durham cliches bit, totally generic, useless quotes, or the interviewer asks about something that's literally against the rules for them to comment on. Given what the TNT producer said last week about the target audience, it's no surprise that they don't bother with these interviews. Only time I have ever enjoyed post-match stuff is something like the pitchside desk that you see sometimes where you get more interaction. So good points about the pitchside desk. I agree with what NBC has done. That's worked out really well. I still think the post-match interviews, for the most part, are a waste of time, but there are exceptions. And there was one exception this past week with Claude Puel after the Leicester-Burnley match. Actually, was it post-match or pre-match? No, it was post-match, where he talked about the game and what it meant for the players. Actually, I think it was pre-match too. That was an example of a good pre-match and a good post-match. But also, Jose, it's almost a cliche at this point too, but he does usually give good, interesting post-match interviews that then stimulate debate, oftentimes in his favor. So I get what you're saying, but I just think that TNT, by this point, have had zero post-match interviews, I think zero pre-match interviews, and are they capable of doing it? Is there an issue technically? Is it? There have been good post-match interviews, but for whatever reason, they're not choosing to actually show them. Although I think Travis, the TNT producer, did say that if there is something that comes up that's interesting, they will show it. So hopefully at some point they will show one.
I tend to agree with that, but I would have made a couple exceptions recently. Santi Solari's first match was a Champions League match. I would have played the pre-match as Real Madrid manager, by the way, for those who don't know. And obviously, we're predisposed towards Solari because he's in U.S. media at ESPN for a long time. So it's really, for me, kind of cool to see him managing Real Madrid. But I would have liked to have heard Santi Solari's pre-match interview on TNT, and then Mourinho after the Juventus game, obviously. Now, I'm not saying go and play. There are 16 matches. There are 16 matches every match day. Go around playing all the pre-match and post-match interviews. But there are a few that you should pull out every then. And you might script the post-match if you're TNT. But if you have a Jose Mourinho post-match interview, Chris, that's what you react to. That's essentially your script. You just go from there because he was something provocative. Now, the other managers in the other matches you can ignore, and you don't need to play those interviews. So I get kind of Travis's point about that. When obviously Travis from TNT and Turner, but there are exceptions, notable exceptions.
Well, also Charlie Austin this week too, as far as the post-match for Southampton, where he was talking about one of the goals that was disallowed, and that was a rare post-match interview with a player where, that was clip-worthy, that was worth showing, and that was one I caught on social media. But there are examples. They are very rare, but hopefully the producers look at that and see, okay, which ones are actually worth showing to us that add value to the broadcast. JP says, great podcast last week. Thank you both. I think you both may be understating the impact a European Super League would have on world soccer. If it comes to fruition, all other competitions will cease to be viable financially. The best comparison I can make is to the NCAA basketball. You have your individual conferences, Serie A, La Liga, etc., the NCAA tournament, the Champions League, and the NIT, the Europa League. Imagine if the biggest teams in each conference decided to create their own super conference and year-end tournament. The ACC without Duke, UNC and Big Ten without Michigan State, Indiana, and the Pac-12 without UCLA, and the SEC without Kentucky, and so on. The resulting conferences wouldn't be attractive from a TV rights perspective, and the NCAA tournament would also lose a lot of its luster if the biggest teams were no longer relevant. While supporters of the remaining universities would still follow, it would not be enough support to remain viable as a commercial entity. In the end, it would have more in common with Division II programs. The competition remains, but virtually no one is paying attention, and all the top talent is elsewhere. I really hope this European Super League never happens. You mentioned the NFL model. Could also say Americanization, slippery slope. Next step after Super League could be clock stoppages to facilitate commercial breaks. Now, Kartik, I know you're a big fan of college basketball and some college sports. Any thoughts on this if JP's heading in the right direction?
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, I've made the same comparison in terms of conferences being like your domestic leagues, and the conferences tend to be regional in the United States for those that don't know college sports. Although there have been some exceptions recently because of TV, only because of TV, where Maryland, which is inside the Beltway in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, was grabbed by the Big Ten, which is a Midwestern conference, so they could grab the Washington, D.C. television market. So there are now a few exceptions, but they're generally regional. And you play through a season to try and qualify for the NCAA tournament, which is like the Champions League. And if you fall just short, but you're still a good team, you end up in the Europa League, the NIT, which is like the Europa League. So it is structured very much the same way as European football right now. The idea, if you took those top teams, if you took Kentucky and Florida out of the SEC, you took Duke, North Carolina, Virginia out of the ACC, I guess he's right. I mean, I guess that viability as far as television products, those conferences go downhill. So it's the same thing, same concept. If you take United, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool out of the Premier League, you take Dortmund and Bayern out of the Bundesliga. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's now that the comparison's put that way. Obviously, I'm just hearing this for the first time, but my reaction would be, yeah, I think he's right, unfortunately, which is why it has to be stopped, quite frankly.
Jose Rodriguez says the Super League is a crazy idea. As a Real Madrid fan, I don't like it, but of course I'd still watch it and support them. However, I still support Grimsby Town in League Two, my team that brings me back to reality, I guess you can say. The true struggle of a team trying to make it. Anthony Bello says, I think there is no way that Fox Sports touches the European Super League. Owning the rights to the Super League would be the worst way to promote the World Cup because none of the players in the league are going to be in the World Cup. The idea that NFL is less open than European soccer leagues is ridiculous. Sure, the bottom is closed, but the top of the league is open. Since the Premier League started in 1992, only 6 clubs have won the title. In the same time period, 15 teams have won the Super Bowl. Also, I will disagree with you on what the NFL is built on. The league isn't made for TV. Sure, television built the league, but the reason it generates all the television money and viewership is because of parity. The same parity European football lacks. Why is having every team thinking they can win the Super Bowl on opening day a bad thing? Why is teams sharing their television tickets and merchandising revenue a bad thing? Why is the salary cap a bad thing? This is one thing I hate about European football. I know my team is never going to win something, and this is despite the fact that we are in the most populous borough of London because other teams are going to outspend us. As an American, I look at that as just sad. So if the big teams want to go to a Super League, go. I don't care. If this is the only way that Crystal Palace can win the league, fine by me. I have watched this team every week for 10 years. I am not stopping now. So, Kartik, some big opinions there about the NFL and the closed league system, and some opinions that it's really not a TV league, and some parity discussion there. What do you think?
I think he makes some fair points. I mean, I think the NFL is a TV-driven league. It wasn't initially when I was an NFL fan. When I started becoming an NFL fan when I was a little kid in the 1980s. But I think it's become more and more television-driven over time, and I think decisions are made based on television as attendances drop, as ticket revenue falls, sponsorship is based on television. I think it's a TV-driven league. That's my opinion. Now, his points about the European, the competitiveness of European football, I'm not going to argue that. I've made those points myself, that I don't like the forced parity necessarily in Major League Soccer. I like an open system because I think it's good for player development. I think it's good for creating community interest and something to chase for clubs outside the top division and clubs outside the very biggest markets. If you have something to chase and you can be promoted, or you have the incentive to develop and sell players and move those players through the system, that would help U.S. soccer if you have promotion and relegation. I am not going to pretend like I think European football is competitive and that I like the Premier League the way it's structured. I have gone on record time and again saying I think the Premier League breakaway was a bad thing for English football. I think it was the big clubs being very greedy, seeing the NFL. I think the NFL was their inspiration. This is where Anthony may not get it, may not quite, and I might not see eye to eye. The NFL was the inspiration for the Premier League breakaway when Lord Sugar and David Dean and others who were part of this master plan, this vision, saw, and the executives at Sky and initially at ITV. Remember ITV when they first talked about breaking away was going to handle the rights. They had watched the NFL and they had watched the success of it in the United States kind of supersede baseball as the top league and the top sport. Now, you could say there were other reasons for that, but I think a big part of it was the way that NFL captured television and Major League Baseball didn't. So I think all of this is based on the NFLization of a lot of European football, particularly the Premier League. One quick point on salary caps. I think that is correct. I want to have a luxury tax. I pushed the idea of a luxury tax when I was working with the NASL. You have to have a way of allowing, if teams are going to overspend, allowing them to spread the revenue to other clubs or back into the league for investment. So again, here I would say Major League Baseball, if you're looking at U.S. leagues, is a better example than the NFL. And I would also say that there is a certain degree of revenue sharing and yet maintenance of independence for independent franchises in Major League Baseball that the NFL and NBA don't have. So I agree with a lot of what Anthony is saying, but I don't think the NFL is the model to look at. I think they might have been the trigger to create a lot of the problems in European football. And the European Super League is essentially now mimicking the NFL, and the Champions League finals now mimicking the Super Bowl. If you want an American inspiration in a, quote, closed league, I would say baseball's a better one.
Yeah, and the NFL is definitely a TV league. I mean, more than half of the revenue that they generate comes from TV revenue. I believe they bring in about $8 billion a year in revenue, and then that's shared between the teams. The way that Major League Soccer is set up, though, Kartik, is that the model is also to be a TV league. It's created by NFL owners, many of them. It's run by a commissioner who used to work for NFL Europe. And the model is a closed league. I think I'm sure it was meant to be a TV league initially, kind of thinking that's the way that they were kind of envisioning this MLS working. And what happened was just the explosion of access to leagues from around the world that really have shot a lot of holes into that model with Major League Soccer. But interesting comments there from Anthony. Raymond Orozco says, I am a fan of European Soccer League, Super League myself, or just move in the Champions League games to weekends, or put in league games in the middle of the week. One point a lot of people aren't bringing up is about the topic is that the European investors, a lot of them aren't even Europeans. This may have to be done for European teams to keep its global dominance over challengers from North America and Asia. Just look at the amount of investment by the two continents. It's a rapidly changing market. Alex says, I know you guys talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but what sense does it make? Does it have making Sporting KC playing a MLS Cup playoff game at the same time as the Chiefs? They are, for some reason, forcing people to choose between whether they want to watch a playoff game in MLS or an NFL game. It just doesn't make any sense. Part of that, too, is the scheduling, too, where they're working weeks in advance and they don't know the matchups. The whole idea of playing at this time of the year anyway, up against the NFL, up against college football, is insane, unless you want to really undermine the TV ratings anyway. So that's a whole topic for a calendar change day. Couple of comments here. These are from iTunes. So Super Say Ian 6 says, a young listener, sophomore in college, not sure how many of us are out there that listen to the show, but the show is fantastic. I started listening in June and haven't missed an episode since. Always excited for the new episode on Thursdays. Keep up the good work. So Ian, thank you for that. We get about 50,000 downloads a month, so there's definitely a lot of people listening to the show like you. And then last but not least, PumpJack00 says on iTunes, I cut the cords years ago and have always struggled finding live games. This is a great pod with good information and interesting discussions. I'm not in media, but I find this pod to be a must listen. So thank you there to PumpJack00. If you guys do enjoy the show, share your feedback or your opinions on iTunes. We'd love to see those and let other people know, other soccer fans know to tune in to the podcast. Also, if you have any questions for us, whether it's advice, opinions, feedback, rants and raves, you can always email us through web at worldsoccertalk.com, as well as facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter at worldsoccertalk. Plus, of course, you can always post comments on worldsoccertalk.com. Kartik, I know it's been a busy, crazy couple of weeks in the politics side of things, but I know there's soccer coverage too. But where can people find you on Twitter if they want to read about some of your comments?
Yeah, KKFLA 737. This politics thing should wind down in the next few days, although it's, good timing for me because it's an international break. Again, I don't want to attack the international game too much, but it's almost like I feel like the timing is pretty good. But KKFLA 737 should be transitioning back from the political stuff as the recounts end here in Florida and back towards proper football for the end of the international break and into what is quite possibly the most exciting part of the European club season, which is after the November international break through Christmas.
Yeah, so the stars have aligned with the international break and politics. I don't think the recount's over yet, though, Kartik. I think it's going to drag on, and hopefully it won't drag on past the international break. But with the international break...
Well, the court ruling we got has said it should end by the 20th, so...
Okay.
See.
All right, fingers crossed there. Looking up at this weekend, there's some big games to look forward to. We've got England against USA in a friendly. We've got England against Croatia. We also have, I think it's on Sunday, we've got USA against Italy, Croatia against Spain, Ireland against Northern Ireland in a friendly, Wales against Denmark, and many, many games. Actually, the Brazil against Uruguay looks interesting, Argentina against Mexico. So on paper, a lot of these games look like there might be good ones to watch. Also, Netherlands against France with a lot on the line in terms of the UEFA Nations League. You got Germany.
Yeah,
Germany could get relegated.
Yeah, Germany could get relegated. And the last time Croatia visited England, now it's a generation ago, it feels like now, visited England in November, we remember what happened, which was the howler by, was it Scott Carson or Ben Foster? I can't remember which, or Paul Robinson. I can't remember who the England keeper was.
There's been so many.
Croatia, yeah. England loses at Wembley. Croatia goes on to win that group, goes to the Euros, was very good in the Euros, got unlucky against Turkey in the quarterfinals, I think it was, and got eliminated. But now England has a chance to win the Nations League group if they can beat Croatia, who were finalists in the World Cup and who eliminated them from the World Cup. Generally a bogey team for England unless Theo Walcott plays like he did in the one-game qualifier in Zagreb that I think people forget in 2009, I think it was under Capello. But England-Croatia I'm looking forward to just because it's, Chris, it feels like it's become a big rivalry just because they happen to play a lot and they're kind of equally matched sides, kind of equal. I know English fans don't want to hear this, but kind of relatively in the same place in international football over the course of the last however long, last more than a decade, because that match I referenced was in 2007. So that is one match I'm actually really looking forward to, England-Croatia.
Yeah, and I believe that one is at Wembley, I believe. So that one should be a must-see game there too. So Kartik, with so much to look forward to this weekend, hopefully on paper, and hopefully that will evolve into actually some good games that we watch in person on TV or streaming. Looking ahead to a great week, and then Club Soccer returning, as well as Soccer X coming up later this week. What should they do?
Enjoy your football.